without further ado, at 1:30 by my clock, I'm going to be delighted to welcome Dr. Martin Compton from KCL to talk to us today. And I know that the more I hear about AI, the more it just proves how little I know. So I'm incredibly pleased to be able to have the opportunity to get a little bit more insight, just another little hook in my brain about all the issues around AI. So you've had the opportunity to read Martin's biography. I'm not going to repeat that. You've also had the chance to read his abstract. Now you get that chance to hear from the man himself. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Martin. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Isla, and thanks to Catherine, especially for the invitation to talk to you. Yeah, after that big intro, I've got a lot of living up to do, haven't I? So I will do my best. In a moment, I'm going to share my screen, and as I do, I can perhaps, rather than giving you yet another summary of my biography, which is not that interesting, or at least it isn't to me because I've heard it so many times, but tell you a little bit about what I'm not. Because I'm not a librarian. I don't have the skills that many of you will have here. Neither am I a computer scientist. And you might be thinking, what on earth is this bloke talking to us about then? Because I thought we were thinking about implications of artificial intelligence in the context of the work that we do. And I hope that I am still, nevertheless, able to offer you something here. Isla just said in her introduction to me that the more she reads, the more there's this realization that there's so little that you can know about this. And that's why I called this presentation what I called it, the Socratic paradox, or one of the Socratic paradoxes. I only know that I know nothing is a way of framing this. And it's very difficult for anybody working in academia, whether it's in an academic role or in a professional services role, to admit that we're in a space where we don't know a lot about something. And I would even put my computer scientist colleagues in this same space, because many of them, as is indicated by that image you can see in the bottom right-hand corner of the black box with the skull and crossbones and the smoke coming out of it, many of them describe the kinds of technologies we're going to talk about briefly today as black box technology. In other words, the kind of technology that they don't even fully understand what is going on beneath the surface, even though they have the expertise to develop and build these things. So if they don't know, how are we supposed to know? How are we supposed to even begin to understand the implications of all of this? But I think that we have to be honest and open with ourselves, with our colleagues, and with the communities that we work with, not least the students that we're all engaged with, and say that we're going to have to learn this stuff together and work our way through it together, so that we can make informed and responsible judgments about what might or might not work, what's worth pursuing and exploring and investigating and trialing, and the things that we need to put our hands up and say, hang on a minute, this is possibly a bridge too far, or there are some serious data implications of this, for example. So just to orient you to the way that I'm looking at my screens, you may be able to still see my video feed and the slides. I'm looking over directly into the camera here, and I can see a whole bunch of blank screens and a few video feeds. If you're happy turning your video on, it would be really nice to see more people, because I'm able to look at screens over here and bounce off a little bit. So those cameras that are coming on, give me a nice big wave. That would be great. That's awesome. I feel like I'm talking to a group of people now. That's fantastic. And I will also be looking over here. That's not because I'm getting fed up with looking at your wonderful sea of faces, but because my slides are over here in the context of the space that I'm in, just so that you know that. Second thing, there's the chat. Say hello in the chat to each other. Say where you're from, say what your interests are, and do keep that chat going, or not. Ignore it if you wish. It's entirely up to you. No obligation. And then the third thing is, in a moment, I'm going to invite you to pick up a mobile device if you have one, or use a secondary monitor or a portion of a single screen, whatever you've got, to contribute to a question that I've got on my next slide. So you might want to get a mobile device ready if you have one. Before we go any further, though, let's just establish what it is that we are talking about. So the second part of my title says why we all need to be engaging with AI. It may be a provocative statement to some of you in itself, but what do we mean by AI? It's not a single easy thing to define. So the history of AI goes back 70 years. It's the human endeavor to get machines to do the work, particularly the cognitive work of humans, and to mirror and match and replicate that. And it has a history. It's had its peaks and its troughs, and I think it's fair to say that we're at a peak at the moment. But whether we are still at the base of a steep curve, or whether we're plateauing or about to enter another trough, is anyone's guess, and it's hugely debated at the moment. But what's really important is that when we think about AI and the kind of language that's being used, particularly in higher education, we have to acknowledge that the way somebody like me, who's working as an academic in a research-intensive university, I am using this term not as a computer scientist, but as someone who's got an interest in education. And I'm using it really broadly to refer to those technologies which have disrupted us since around November 22 with the introduction of ChatGPT. And that is the generative AI. So if you look at those nesting dolls, those robotic nesting dolls, AI is the big picture, and generative AI, turning text into lots of text, turning text into images, turning an image into text, turning an image into a video, all of those one media to another media generational tools. That's kind of what most people mean when they say AI in academia at the moment. So there is this confusion of terms. Broadly, that's what I'm talking about today, because that's the thing that's making most people anxious or excited or a bit of both. All right. So that top right hand image is the representation of media in, media out, as a way of kind of defining what generative AI is all about. And the black box, is it all doom and gloom? Do we know what's happening? Is it the end of the world? I don't think so, but some people do. So I promised you some opportunities to interact. Nice to see some hellos coming in the chat as well. Keep those up, please. But let's start with an anonymous opportunity to respond. Just in case anybody can't make this out or hasn't got access to it, I will read the statements. They say, firstly, I've experimented with generative AI tools, things like Copilot, Google Gemini, ChatGPT, Midjourney, DALL-E, the latter two being image generators, the first three being text largely, but also image and multimedia now. The second one is, I'm confident I know enough about capabilities and limitations of Gen AI tools to make decisions about how they can be integrated. And the third, students need to be AI literate. And the fourth, my job is likely to change a lot due to AI. So we've got 90 responses and counting in there. Thank you ever so much. What you're seeing on here is the mean score. And also when I hover over it, the spread of those scores. So I'm going to start with the easiest one first. Here, most people in this space agree strongly, 100%, or at least fairly strongly, that students need to be AI literate. Now, you may be the outlier or ambivalent, because you think, well, what do you mean by AI literacy? Do you mean they have to have computer science skills? So there are ways we can understand different interpretations here. But that mass of people piled up here is kind of indicative of where the sector is going in my reading of it. I'm leading on AI and innovation projects at King's College, and from all of the work that I've done with other institutions, within my own institution, with students, with academic staff, with libraries and collections colleagues, it seems to be that we've reached a point where we accept, at least institutionally, at least as a sector, that we need to be working on both staff and student AI literacy. What that is something else. Let's go back to the beginning though, and here we can see that we've got almost a mean sitting in the middle there, and that is the degree to which people are experienced in using these tools. Now, we are seeing a shift More and more and more people are experienced in using these, but look at those numbers of people who haven't experimented. Now, you might have come to this meeting thinking, I'm the only one who hasn't done any of this ChatGPT stuff, but you're not alone. That's the first important thing to remember, and it's really critical to get that. Secondly, what I would say is there is this tendency towards experimentation, and if you are down here, it's worth thinking, why is it that I haven't engaged with this? Have I got some kind of values-based resistance to it? Have I not had time? What have I read things that are really putting me off? What is the root of this? Have I just not, I've got enough to do in my life? Thank you very much. There's so many reasons why we might not be engaging. But I think if we agree on this, then we have to find a way of experimenting as at least a baseline way of pushing ourselves forward towards our own literacy so that we might support that student literacy. And I think that's a critical point. Again, you can argue with me in the chat if you want. Confidence levels, a similar pattern that I'm seeing across the board. I think we need to be moving everybody towards these two that are sitting at the end there. Fantastic, the 100% confident, but look at where everybody else is sat. We need to be supporting one another, metaphorically holding one another's hands, sitting at each other's elbows, showing each other things that you can do, problems that have arisen, all of that kind of stuff. And this thing here, this is the one that puts the wind up us most. When you're at my kind of end of career, I'm not that far from thinking about retirement. It's perhaps less of a worry. More junior colleagues or youthful colleagues, don't have to be junior, do they? Might be thinking, what is my career going to look like in 5 years' time, 10 years' time? Where are we going to be at? I think it's almost certain that the kinds of work that you do and that I do are going to be significantly impacted. And in two ways, because we're in education, in terms of the careers that we're preparing students for, and in terms of the ways in which we prepare students for those careers. So not only do we as institutions need to be teaching students about AI in medical education, across STEM, throughout the humanities, through to dentistry and whatever, but we also need to be looking at how we are teaching, how they're being assessed, and the kinds of tools that we use to support the research that they will engage in to be successful in their undergraduate and postgraduate programs. That connotes a lot of potential effort for people in the kinds of roles that you work in. So thank you for your contributions there. Let's move on. So the links that are available in here, you can have access to at your leisure after the session. I will share a link and remind you again of how to access these slides. This quote here about there being no gatekeepers, there are no gates, the garden hasn't been built yet, is really evocative for me because it connotes an undiscovered country, maybe a sci-fi representation, but something that we do not yet know. We haven't had the opportunity to voyage into space, and all of the so-called discovery, sometimes of people that were happily living in places already, was very much a 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th century phenomenon. Here we're at the threshold of something that is very, very new, and in terms of the ways in which we gather information, we reproduce information, we share information, and the ways in which we work and think and study and play and all of that kind of stuff. And that suggestion from Stephen Marsh there, I think, is a really nice way of framing it. If you haven't seen this and you want to have a look, you can follow the link later. It's a Guardian article, which is a series of very short essays from a number of writers talking about very different perspectives, from the cynical, horrified, to the oh, I can work with this kinds of perspective. And so it's very interesting to read. So that's my starting point. Here we go. Here's one for the chat rather than from for the anonymous. Can anybody hazard a guess what my prompt, in other words, what I instructed mid-journey to produce, to get the images on the left and the images on the right? Anyone want to throw a suggestion into the chat? Oh, wow. Isla, you are straight on top of this. Well done. Fantastic. Yeah. So, surprise, surprise, I asked for a university librarian and I got the images on the left. I asked for a university academic and I got the images on the right. It will be no surprise to you, probably, that this particular tool, Midjourney, through Discord, has given me 3 young, white appearing women for the librarians and 3 men of mixed age, it has to be said, all of whom are wearing ties, all of whom are white, 3 of whom are sporting glasses as the academics. This is the kind of thing that visually can really make you stop and start. So on the one hand, I type a few words in and I get unique images that no one else owns the copyright to, that I can use in my presentations. Wow, this is fantastic. And on the other hand, oh my God, you know, the gender stereotypes, the racial biases in here, what is going on? It's led to a lot of people saying, oh yeah, this AI, it's biased, it's prejudiced, it's racist, it's sexist. But the technologies are not. The foundation data, the data upon which they have been trained, however, is. In other words, humans are, and the massive data, the biases in the data, so the image data or the text-based data that they're trained on, is exactly this. So these are reflecting back to us those biases and prejudices that we as humans manage to load onto the internet. And when these kinds of things became apparent, so software engineers, programmers, algorithm writers in Silicon Valley and elsewhere thought we need to do something about that. So if I did the same thing in DALL-E 3, which is part of Copilot, so if you've got a Microsoft account at work, you can use it for free yourself and in a data protected way, you find you put the same thing in, chances are you'll get mixed gender librarians. Chances are you'll get diversity of ethnic origin in your academic representations. Problem solved. Of course it isn't. It's a mask, because what they're doing is they're realizing that all of these biases exist in the data, and some canny software engineer, imagine your own stereotypical profile, if you will, is inserting diversity additions to your prompts so that they come back apparently more diverse. They haven't fixed the problem, they've masked it. Now, whether that is a good thing or a bad thing, I'll let you decide. But what is important about that is, in that simple illustration is so much of what is problematic about this whole evolution, this whole disruption of generative AI technologies. We've got this massive and profound revolutionary technology that can do this, any image you want of anything. Amazing. And then we've got the, oh my God, look at what it's throwing back at us. And I think that using images in this way is a really good way of illustrating that actually in the text-based outputs of tools like ChatGPT and Copilot, we have the same kind of biases, but they're much, much harder to pin down, spot, and identify. So I think that by way of my first warning, or, oh, isn't it amazing? Whatever, however you want to take it, I think that those images reflect it well. So what I've got for you are a few questions that I'd like you to ponder over and think about, not necessarily directly respond to right now, but you, like I say, you can chat about it, to think about where we're going to go with this and what the implications are for you and what you're going to do about it. So the first question is, can a machine do whatever it is you want them to do for you? And if so, why? And at every stage, as we grow our understanding of these technologies, as we move from having not experimented at all to dipping our toes in the water a little bit, ask ourselves, okay, what this is able to do, why am I wanting it to do it? And is that a good thing? So again, another AI generated image here. I was looking for a pointless machine for the librarians here. Here is a page turner for a book. So, you know, the idea is crank down the handle, and somehow I don't think it will practically work as an engineering creation, but I wind it back up and it turns the page somehow. Obviously, that's much more effort than actually turning the page. So a pointless machine. And actually, when we presented with novelties like this, sometimes we can use them for very, very pointless things, generating crappy limericks or writing poor rap songs and putting them to some terrible music and all this kind of stuff. You know, Gen AI can do that, but should we be doing that? What about the more purposeful things? And the sub questions to this then are, what do I lose by offloading that to a technology like this? But what can I potentially gain? And that sort of balancing act all the way down the line is something I've found really, really useful, because I'm quite an enthusiastic dabbler in these things. And I've done some useless, complete waste of time things. And you only start to realize slowly sometimes that actually what you're doing is taking away an essential component of a process. And on the other hand, I've used it for some things I'm thinking, oh my God, this is revolutionary. This is going to change my life. And actually, it already has. And there may be people in this room who feel the same about it. So what is lost? What is gained? One thing that I want to emphasize in the next couple of slides is about the pace of evolution and development. So it wasn't so long ago that people were saying, what we need to do is give students image-based questions because ChatGPT can't give you a response to that. That's changed really rapidly. And this is just an illustration of that. People say, it hallucinates references, it makes up citations. Well, the free version does, but GPT-4 is so much more powerful and reliable. Copilot, again, has improved its citation metrics remarkably recently. This image here, you've probably seen it. It's an internet meme. Some wag doing a math question, trying to find the hypotenuse in this triangle has been instructed to find X, and they circled it and found it. And I asked Copilot what was shown in this image. And not only did it explain the joke to me, like some boring mansplainer in a pub, but it also solved the equation for me. These are the kinds of things that are evolving all the time. So whatever you've heard about what these things can and can't do, be skeptical about it, because things are changing all the time. I'm not sure whether I shared or had the opportunity to share my audio here. I've just got a 30-second video clip. Can you, if you hear audio, give me a thumbs up. And if you don't, I'll share the link with you and you can watch it at your leisure at a later stage.
Hi, I'm Martin Compton, and nice to meet you all. 这是我在家里穿着典型的衣服，身处典型的环境中。Dit er hvor jeg måske laver 40% af mit arbejde. بقية الوقت سأرتدي قميصا وأذهب إلى المكتب في كلية الملك لندن. В будь-якому випадку радий познайомитися з вами всіма. Це задоволення бути тут. I look forward to working with you today.
So it's imperfect, but I think what is probably evident is that the only one of those languages that I speak is actually English. If we've got any Mandarin speakers in the room, you'll probably say, your numbers are a bit shaky, but most people who speak those languages in there tell me that it's accurate enough to understand what's going on. And what is remarkable about this is somebody like me with minimal video production, technical expertise, all of that, can produce something like that, in that case for free, fairly easily. Because that's the combination of 3 different AI technologies. That's translation, that's voice synthesis, because it sounded like me, it wasn't a robotic voice. And thirdly, articulation of the video so that my mouth movement matched the words that were coming out of my mouth. In the same program, I've trained an avatar of me so that I'm able to put any text in and get it to speak anything that I want it to speak. On the one hand, amazing. Think how we can connect with our international students. On the other hand, oh my God, we've got 2 elections coming up this year, one in the UK, one in the States. If Martin can deepfake things like this, think what could happen in terms of propaganda. So everything that we encounter, on the one hand, it's like, wow. And then suddenly it's, oh my God. And it's really that cost benefit that we have to weigh up. The genie is out of the bottle. The cat is out of the bag. Whatever metaphor you want to use, we are confronted with a situation where this is the reality. And enabling our students to better understand that that is the reality, I think, is important. Which leads me to my next question, which is, what are the implications of engagement with this stuff? But also, what are the implications of not engaging? You may have read about environmental costs, data protection issues, about copyright issues, big thing in libraries and collections discussions, I would imagine. But what about not engaging? Is it an option? Could we say, for example, that students shouldn't use Google or any kind of search engine, or actually the internet? Is that really a practical thing for us to say? People did say that when search engines and online resources were first available. And if you're anything like my age, you will probably remember how people tried to ban calculators from being used for students learning maths. Things change, technologies change, they evolve, and things are introduced over time. And given that a lot of jobs, particularly white-collar jobs, are being impacted by these technologies, if we're not really supporting students' use of them ethically and responsibly, are we therefore not actually supporting them towards the kinds of careers that are inevitably going to include these sorts of technologies? So again, it's one of those things. I'm going to take some responses in here just now. If you've lost the link, you can rescan it, or I can repost it in here, just so that I'd be quite interested to hear from your community, if you feel that collective sense of identity that I was getting from the whole UHMLG vibe at the beginning. What are the issues in particular for you with AI and Gen AI? If you want to put them in the chat, that's equally fine. Well, I'm so glad I didn't promise to go through all of these in turn. Look at that. So looking big in the middle there, we've got some really prominent things here: copyright, plagiarism, bias, hallucinations, data projection, environmental impact, broadly ethics, but a whole bunch of other things as well. And this is remarkable, and I'm very grateful to you for this, because it gives me some really interesting data points to look at. What you're seeing here, of course, is a representation of sector-wide anxieties about these things. When somebody or an institution like OpenAI deliberately disrupts, it can really feel like a personal attack on our own individual identity as a professional. So, you know, a lot of people are walking around thinking that ChatGPT was released just to get up the noses of librarians or educators. That's how it can feel sometimes. And all of this, I think, is indicative of that. And all I would say at this stage is I don't have immediate answers, but I do think that we have a responsibility to find a way through this. So let's see if we can put a bit more of a positive spin on things. Given all of those issues that you've just raised there, do you get a say in how things will change? I don't think we're at a stage now where, unless we want to go off the grid and live on an island in the Outer Hebrides, can we say that we need to ban this stuff. But the more that we engage and understand, the better we're able to make informed decisions about what is and isn't appropriate. So I really think the more that we educate ourselves, the better it can be. Incidentally, this is another AI generated image, and you see apparent photorealism, and then you look at the hand and you'll notice that there is distortion in the fingers. Don't know if you can see that. And that is very typical of AI generated images. Terrible at fingers, toes, keyboards, those kinds of things tend to be great at faces. And that's because the training data, images massively have more faces in them than they do fingers and toes. And that's why it knows what a finger looks like, but sometimes it doesn't actually give you the right amount or in the right configuration. It's really, really interesting when you start even just poking beneath the surface of this. So do you get a say in how things will change? I think in part you might be able to. Colleagues at King's, a number of them, some of them from libraries and collections, are involved in research projects, some funded, some not, some very sort of small scale action research. And they are actually having an influence on the kinds of approaches that we're taking across the college at the moment. I tend to agree with this, except for one word here. This is from UK Gua, who some of you may be familiar with, and the idea that we have a choice to either embrace AI as an integral component of academic pursuit or risk obsolescence. My objection to this is with the word embrace. The embrace is something you do to somebody that you love or you have affection for. I'm not putting my arms around the blooming robot right now, but I will engage with it. And whether I, in my mind, manifest something anthropomorphic, humanoid, or whatever, it's very difficult not to do if you're in a chat with Copilot or ChatGPT, or whether I am able to maintain that conceptualization of something that is not intelligent at all and is very, very algorithmic, which is much more of a computer sciencey point of view, I will be engaging. And I think it is important. How far you engage and whether you do eventually put your arms around it is entirely up to you for the most part, I think. So my fourth question, rounding off very soon now, is what are the productive uses for me? And the reason I say that is because if we're going to do this thing, the conclusion I reached based on your input earlier to support students with their use of AI and the way we use AI to support that understanding, we need to find a way that it can support my work. So, for example, the kind of stuff I do, I make quite a lot of videos, and there are some real drudgery elements to it. Transcript creation, AI sorted that. I actually prefer using a YouTube generated transcript, but I don't know if you've ever done it. It doesn't punctuate it. So I put it back into GPT-4 in my case, but there are other tools available, and I get it to punctuate it, and then I check that version. I get it to adjust spellings, change jargon, ensure that it's as close to 100% perfect transcript as I can imagine. I can manage. I did an hour-long transcript yesterday, and it took me about an hour. That's something that would have taken me about 2 or 3 hours in the past. Creating thumbnails for videos, creating accessible elements to it, so alternative text, is brilliant. You know, it saves so much time. So I'm using it for quite a lot, and you've already seen the translation example. That's my thing. That's what started me off. But also reformatting information, synthesizing information where I just need to get a handle, producing things in different media formats, all of those kinds of things I'm finding increased utility day in, day out. I just want to draw your attention to this. I'm not going to work you through it now, but when you follow this link, if you follow this link later, I got some sample uses here. And for example, a short video showing how you can use these tools to improve the quality of your notes. And then finally, just to finish off, how far will you explore and who with, particularly if you're at that haven't touched it end. I think that the metaphorical hand-holding as you voyage into the unknown is so much better if you identify people that you can work and discover with. Whether you open those doors and you see rainbows and unicorns or a Terminator vision of hell, I can't speak for you. But to know that there are those things happening there. And then the final link in this presentation should take me to, let me just check. It doesn't seem to be working, so I'm going to share it separately. It should take you to a short course that we've written at King's, designed for academic staff, professional services staff, and students as an introduction to generative AI. So while I share a link to these slides and to that course in the chat, I will stop sharing, stop talking, and take your questions.
Wowzer. Thank you, Martin. That was a rollicking great start to the forum. So thank you very much indeed for that. There's been a right old, you've been checking the chat as we've been going along, obviously, but I was particularly taken with that final point about the difference between embracing AI, ignoring it completely, and there has to be something in between. There has to be a more measured approach, a more critical approach to it, not dismissing it out of hand, but but being aware, because without being aware, it's crazy. So Sam, I think you were going to be collating the questions. Is that all right?
Yep, that's fine. Yep.
Sam.
So the first question is about what are your thoughts on AI in the digital divide?
I think that's a really good question, actually, because a lot of people are saying, well, you know, this is just going to exacerbate things because those that can afford it will be paying for GPT-4 licenses, getting the whole package, and they get an improved benefit from that. What I say in response is that there are two things that we need to consider. One of them is the reality of the world that we live in. Two students sitting side by side in a lecture hall. One of them's got the state-of-the-art MacBook, can do loads of stuff, all the software, and another student has got a £150 Chromebook. They're still on the same course. I have no influence over that. That is technology. It's got nothing to do with AI. It's just that people have different amounts of money to spend. In another way, it kind of mirrors the kind of cultural capital that some students come with. Many students come with parents who went to university, many don't. And actually, that's where the crossover point is, because those many that don't have people to bounce ideas off when they get home about the thing that they were talking about in their studies. So maybe as people's understanding of the use of these technologies evolve, they can start using chatbot interfaces to discuss some of the ideas with an artificial intelligence. So I think that there is a potential to equalize, whilst at the same time acknowledging some students have always been able to afford the best kit. So I'm less concerned about that aspect of it, particularly because of some of the conversations I've had with colleagues across Africa who did the course that I've just shared in the chat as a collective, and who are saying, you know, that this is remarkable in areas that, particularly in rural areas where there are no teachers. And so they're exploiting the opportunities for students who have phones and 5G connection or 4G connection, sometimes even 3G, to use some of these technologies in really quite creative, novel, liberating, and equity defining ways.
Okay, following on from that, there's a comment that I think will get people thinking, should universities be paying for access to the premium versions of AI tools so that all students do have equitable access?
Well, if you've got a Microsoft Enterprise license, as most universities do, you and all of your students who are 18 plus have access to GPT-4 and DALL-E 3 in the form of Copilot, formerly Bing Chat. Everybody has that. Under 18s are allowed to use it, but that's up to the discretion of the university. We've got 600 under 18s at King's, but we don't see a problem with them having access to it. There are additional guardrails in there. A lot of people prefer ChatGPT interface, but we are providing it already if we have that Microsoft version, no extra cost. What does cost extra is the full Office 365 Copilot package, which is something like $30 per user per month. It's going to be out of the reach of most institutions, as would site licenses for any of these tools. ChatGPT costs $20 a month. Nobody can afford to pay for that for all staff and students, unless they're a tiny institution, I don't think.
Okay, that's great, thank you. And Ruth has asked, have you had much pushback on the course that details that you've put into the chat?
Pushback in what way?
Do you think from people at King's who think students perhaps shouldn't be encouraged to use AI, despite of the argument that you've just made?
I suspect that the pushback is in the form of the invisible not doing it.
Right.
I mean, I accept that. I mean, I get, when I'm in face-to-face sessions in particular, I get people expressing quite deep-seated and valid anxiety, and really, really strongly articulated and coherent arguments why we shouldn't be doing this. I get it. I totally get it. And I think that we have to welcome dialogue and difficulty in these spaces. I'm not an evangelist. I hope I'm coming across as a pragmatist in this space. I think we have a responsibility. I do get excited by some of the things you can do, but I also get worried about some of the things. But I think we're much better placed if we start trying to drive the narratives instead of being told what to do, think, and behave by billion-dollar tech corporations like OpenAI. We need to start saying, this is how we're going to use it. This is what we want to need. This is what Microsoft should be doing for us as a sector, not just in UK, but globally. And the more that we articulate a coherent vision for that, the better and more likely we are to achieve at least some of our goals in that space.
Okay, and the next question is about any comment on the massive carbon footprint of these tools?
Yeah, I mean, you can hardly argue against that. I mean, they are significant. I did see something that might feel a bit weaselly to some people that compares certain activities in terms of carbon footprint. So, for example, generating a transcript, if I were to generate it myself by listening and typing, my carbon footprint using existing technologies is greater than that it costs to use a large language model. But I mean, that is a bit weaselly, I think. I think it is hugely problematic, and I don't have a very quick and easy solution to it. But what I do know is that across the board, we need to be thinking about these kinds of things. There's still so many people are traveling all over the globe for conferences. We've got a lot of problems in this space, and we need to understand fully exactly what the expense is and work on lobbying, or being part of the lobby that says we need to bigger ways of reducing those kinds of footprints. Yeah, it's not a satisfactory answer even to myself, but it's because it's one of those things. Yeah.
Okay, and just a follow-up about the question on the reaction to the training session is that Ruth has said they started running training on using AI for literature reviews and have received a complaint from an academic member of staff.
Right, okay. So, I mean, I would engage with that member of staff, try to understand what the issue is, and then articulate my rationale for that, which presumably is something on the lines of students are using it and they're using it badly. We need to show them how to use it well. I mean, that would be my line.
And I guess another question that's kind of highlighted that is how do you try and tackle alarmism in the student base? So the other end of the spectrum, where students won't use it at all costs because they're concerned that there are going to be penalties and consequences for that.
Yeah, I mean, we're navigating unknown territory and we're going to make some mistakes. Some people are going to do some stupid things, like the Texas professor that ran all of his students' work through ChatGPT and said, "Did you write this?" And it said yes. Those kinds of behaviors we have to get on top of and minimize, limit. So, not doing anything daft, remembering that we already have existing data policies, all of that kind of stuff. That's why I've mentioned Copilot several times, because the data is secure in and out in there. I think it's really difficult to counteract that, but how are we going to progress at all if we don't have some conversations? And framing everything as an opportunity to discuss and to raise the potential issues with this can only benefit the students who might fall foul of it, and the academics who likewise might fall foul of it. We've had so many examples: lawyers generating fallacious cases, academics creating resources and citing sources that don't exist. This isn't just a student issue. And to those students who are anxious, I would say the same thing that I said to colleagues here at the beginning, that we understand and respect that, but we need to make informed decisions and responsible decisions. So how can we learn about some of these issues firsthand, rather than depending on what has become a massively hyped and sometimes quite extreme media landscape around this? I mean, some of the stuff you're seeing in prominent press is so ill-informed, it's ridiculous.
I guess that was a comment from Emily that kind of linked to that. So the potential implications for keeping, for archiving, keeping accurate historical records for the future. So if we can't always tell what's accurate and real now, then, you know, how do we deal with that?
Yeah, I'm glad it's not really my remit to address that and answer that and respond to that. All I can say is I think it's a major issue, and for people involved in archiving, I think it's going to be a problem. I mean, I think the internet is already awash with garbage, and it will only increase. You know, there is a whole bunch of garbage out there, garbage that is actually garbage, provably false, and garbage that is garbage because it's provably against my personal values, if you see what I mean. You know, so there's a ton of problems related to that already. So I think it's an extension of an existing problem rather than a new one, and the ways in which we're trying to challenge that at the moment, we need to continue and double down on and do more of. And but detection, not really a solution at the moment, and prevention through banning is not a solution either. Some places tried that and that didn't work for very long.
So I've got to probably squeeze one last question. There's one from Isla here. So to what extent should we be looking for students and academics to declare their use of AI tools as part of their work? I know that's something we've talked about in the office.
Yeah, I think it's vital. So I'll just give you an example. So yesterday on my blog, I posted a summary of a discussion I had with a colleague who's a massive AI enthusiast, works in law, been working in AI and law for 30 years. And we recorded this discussion. The video link is available there. And if you want to hear what he has to say, then please, by all means, watch the video. And because I wanted a summary of this, I engaged AI. And then at the foot of my post, the first post you can see on that blog link, I said, first draft of this summary generated from meeting transcript via Claude. So I'm trying to model good practice in that space. I'm encouraging students to do that, but academic staff need to be leading the way, as do librarians and all professional services colleagues as well, because we need to be clear about this. There's some stuff that we do, actually quite a lot of stuff that we do, that can be done better by these technologies than by us, and a lot faster. So why wouldn't you? That's a question to finish with.
We're at 20 past by my watch, and having just seen a news story on the BBC site today saying AI spotted my cancer when doctors didn't. It matches that, or it answers that question. Why wouldn't we use it? But using it as opposed to being used by it, and all of those different things, and transparency and everything else. So much to think about, so many questions unanswered, and so many questions generated because of the answers and everything else, as always with a fantastic talk. Thank you so much, Martin. And I hope a round of applause in a virtual way with your reactions and all the rest of it. Really, really appreciate it. I'm sure that there'll be a lot of rewatching of the recording and following up your links and just thinking more and in-house discussions as well. So hugely appreciative. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. I'm going to hang around in the room and read the chat if you don't mind, but good luck with the rest of your event.
Yeah, any comments that you want to stick in to answer a little bit further, that would, amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are going to pause, lovely people, for a few minutes, back at 25 to, so refresh your glasses,